Most people think self-sufficiency on half an acre means cramming as many animals as possible into a tiny space. That thinking is exactly what destroys a homestead before it ever gets going. More animals isn't the answer. The right animals are. 9 specific species that work together like one living machine, producing meat, eggs, milk, fertilizer, and pest control without draining a wallet or anyone's sanity. Here's something nobody mentions up front. The average backyard farmer spends over $3,000 a year on feed alone, and most of that money goes toward animals that were never built for small acreage in the first place. This breaks down 9 animals that turn half an acre into a genuinely self-sustaining food system. Animals that feed themselves, feed each other, and feed a family year-round. By the end, there's a full blueprint for a homestead that runs on nature instead of a credit card. Here's the part nobody wants to say out loud. Feed prices have jumped 28 to 40% since 2021. That bag of layer pellets that used to run $14 is pushing $20 now, and it's not coming back down. The average small flock owner spends $45 to $60 a month on chicken feed alone. Add a couple of goats, and that's another $80. Throw in hay, supplements, vet visits, and replacement animals, and a self-sufficient homestead can quietly cost $2,500 to $4,000 a year just to keep running. That's not self-sufficiency. That's a subscription service with feathers. And the worst part is, most of those animals aren't even pulling their weight. They're consuming more than they produce. More work, more spending, less food on the table than just driving to the grocery store would have cost. This pattern shows up constantly. Someone watches a homesteading video, gets fired up, buys chickens, ducks, goats, and rabbits all in the same month. 6 months later, they're burned out, the feed bill is out of control, half the animals aren't producing anything, and the whole dream starts falling apart. It's not a work ethic problem. It's that nobody ever explained which animals actually work on limited land and which ones just quietly eat the budget. Most homesteading content tells people what animals to raise. Almost none of it explains which animals to combine so they actually support each other. That's the entire difference between a homestead that drains a person and one that sustains them. The species on this list don't just produce food, they close loops. They cut down on inputs. They turn waste into resources, and they do all of it on half an acre or less. This isn't some trendy new idea, by the way. Go back 200 years. Small farmers across Europe, Asia, and colonial America didn't have feed stores or bags of pellets showing up at the door. They had land, often less than an acre, and they had to make it work, and they did. Traditional small farms were diversified, but never crowded. There's a real difference there. Every animal earned its place by function, not by what looked good, or what the neighbor happened to be raising, but by what it actually contributed to the whole system. Meat, eggs, fertilizer, pest control, land clearing, pollination. Rabbits, ducks, bees, and fish were historically favored on small plots, not because they were exotic, but because they were efficient. They produced a lot from very little, fit into tight spaces, and didn't need massive barns or expensive inputs. Chickens became dominant later, not because they were the best fit for small homesteads, but because they scaled well for industrial farming. Factory operations could raise tens of thousands of them in climate-controlled buildings on bulk feed discounts. That model was never built for half an acre. Somewhere along the way, the old logic got forgotten, and small properties started copying industrial models that simply don't translate down to that scale. Modern commercial agriculture replaced self-sustaining animal systems with feed dependency. Farmers turned into customers. Traditional knowledge got dismissed as old-fashioned, and small homesteaders ended up buying inputs every single month for animals that used to feed themselves entirely. That knowledge didn't disappear, though. It just got buried, and it's worth digging back up. These 9 animals are the exact species traditional farmers relied on for generations, proven by centuries of real results, not internet trends. Starting with the most underrated protein source in homesteading, rabbits. A single doe can produce 50 to 60 pounds of meat per year, more protein per square foot than any other backyard animal, including cattle, and on a footprint smaller than a parking space. They breed fast, a doe can kindle every 30 to 35 days, and kits reach harvest weight in 8 to 12 weeks, which means multiple litters a year from just 2 or 3 does and 1 buck. Feed cost runs roughly $15 to $20 a month for a small breeding trio, and that's before forage even enters the picture. Rabbits thrive on garden scraps, dandelion, clover, and comfrey, and a decent forage system can cut that feed bill in half. The real hidden value, though, is the manure. Rabbit manure is cold, meaning it goes straight into garden beds without composting first, no burning, no waiting, and it's loaded with nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Setup is simple. A basic hutch system runs under $150, and 3 does plus 1 buck makes a complete starter colony. Nothing else on half an acre comes close to their efficiency. So the next animal pairs with rabbits almost unfairly well. If rabbits are the backbone, quail are the secret weapon. Coturnix quail are tiny. 50 of them can fit in the space of a single chicken coop, and they start laying eggs at just 6 weeks old. Chickens need 5 to 6 months for that. Each hen lays around 250 to 300 eggs a year, and those eggs pack more iron, B12, and protein per ounce than a chicken egg. At farmers markets, they sell for $5 to $8 a dozen. But even without selling a single one, quail earn their place through sheer speed and efficiency, eating roughly a pound of feed per bird per month. Here's where the system connects. Rabbit manure feeds the garden. The garden produces scraps. Those scraps supplement quail feed. The quail produce more manure for more garden fertility, and the loop tightens with every cycle. Housing is stackable wire cages, a converted shelf, even a section of garage. Total startup, under $150 for birds and housing. Dressed quail meat sells for $12 to $15 a pound at specialty markets and reaches harvest weight in just 6 to 8 weeks. A small bird with massive output and almost zero footprint. Chickens make this list too, but not the way most people raise them. Most backyard farmers pick high production hybrids designed for factory farms, birds that burn out after 18 months and can't survive without commercial feed. A self-sustaining half-acre system needs heritage dual-purpose breeds. Plymouth Rocks, Orpingtons, Australorps, Rhode Island Reds. These birds lay 200 to 250 eggs a year and provide solid meat once retired from laying. But more importantly, they actually forage hard. A well-managed heritage flock on rotational grazing can find 30 to 50% of its own food from bugs, seeds, grass, and kitchen scraps, dropping a feed bill from around $60 a month to under $35. The key is rotational grazing, moving the flock between small paddocks so the ground recovers and insect populations regenerate. Pair that with comfrey plantings and a scratch pen full of compost material, and chickens practically feed themselves through 3 seasons. 6 to 8 hens and 1 rooster is plenty for half an acre. Giving 4 to 5 dozen eggs a week and a sustainable breeding program, that means never buying chicks again. They scratch, fertilize, turn compost, and eat garden pests. The pest control crew of the whole operation. For anyone who wants milk without a massive commitment, Nigerian dwarf goats are next. Full-size dairy goats need real space, heavy fencing, and a lot of feed. Nigerian dwarfs need a backyard. These small animals stand around 20 inches tall, weigh 60 to 80 pounds, and produce 1 to 2 quarts of milk a day. Rich, creamy milk with the highest butterfat content of any dairy goat breed, around 6 to 10%. That butterfat means butter, cheese, yogurt, and soap from one animal eating a fraction of what a standard goat eats. Feed cost runs about $25 to $30 a month for 2 does, and they're browsers rather than grazers, meaning they eat brush, weeds, leaves, and bark. Things already growing on the property for free, clearing overgrown areas while feeding themselves. At least 2 are needed, since goats are herd animals that will scream all day if kept alone. Housing stays minimal, a small 3-sided shelter and 4-foot woven wire fencing, since Nigerians are small enough not to challenge it constantly. Startup runs $300 to $500 for 2 does and basic shelter, and the milk alone can replace $150 to $200 a month in dairy purchases. Real savings showing up on the grocery bill every week. The manure feeds straight back into the same fertility loop running through the rabbits and quail. The next animal surprises most people, and almost nobody talks about it. Muscovy ducks, the forgotten homestead powerhouse. Unlike regular ducks that quack non-stop, Muscovies hiss and wag their tails, quiet enough that neighbors often don't even know they're there. They're excellent foragers, eating slugs, mosquito larvae, ticks, beetles, and grass, and on half an acre, they can find up to 70% of their own food. They're also the only domestic duck breed not descended from mallards, a genuinely different species, more closely related to wild tree ducks, which makes them hardier, more disease-resistant, and better at surviving on forage alone. Each hen lays 80 to 120 eggs a year, large and rich, excellent for baking, and the meat is lean, red, and often compared to veal rather than the fatty, greasy duck served at restaurants. A Muscovy hen will hatch and raise her own ducklings without an incubator, a heat lamp, or any help at all, meaning the flock replaces itself automatically for free. Setup is simple: a basic shelter, drinking water without needing a pond, and room to roam. Startup under $100 for a breeding trio. They also integrate well with chickens, sharing space without conflict while picking off the pests chickens miss. The next animal has been used for thousands of years and pays back far more than anyone expects: honeybees. They don't give meat or eggs, but they might be the single most valuable animal on a half-acre homestead. A healthy hive produces 30 to 60 pounds of honey a year, and at local prices, raw honey sells for $10 to $15 a pound, meaning up to $900 in value from a 2-foot box sitting in the yard. But the real value sits in pollination. A single hive can increase fruit and vegetable yields by 30 to 70%, meaning the apple trees produce more, the squash sets more fruit, the berry bushes explode, and every food-producing plant on the property benefits. That yield bump means more food for the family, and more scraps and forage for every other animal in the system. More garden output translates straight into supplemental feed for the rabbits, quail, chickens, and ducks. Startup runs around $300 to $400 for one hive, protective gear, and a starter colony with annual maintenance landing around $50 for winter sugar feeding and replacement frames. Beeswax comes along as a bonus product. Candles, salves, lip balm, wood polish, all from something that would otherwise get thrown away. Once the seasonal rhythm clicks, the actual time commitment runs around 30 minutes a week for most of the year. The next animal is genuinely old school, the kind a great-grandparent might have raised, and it runs on almost zero effort. Pigeons, specifically utility breeds like kings or mondaines. A single breeding pair produces 12 to 16 squabs a year, and the birds pair for life, incubate their own eggs, and feed their own babies, requiring almost nothing from the keeper. Squab is a premium meat. Restaurants pay $15 to $25 a bird, but even for home use, one breeding pair delivers a steady supply of tender, rich, dark meat. Feed cost is barely worth mentioning. Pigeons eat about 2 ounces a day per bird, and a 50-pound bag of grain mix runs about 15 days and lasts months. Short free fly periods let them forage on their own, cutting feed costs another 40 to 50%. Housing is a simple loft, a converted shed corner, a 6x4 foot wooden structure with nest boxes and perches, total build under $150, with room for 6 to 8 breeding pairs comfortably. Daily maintenance is just filling grain and checking water. Less time than checking an inbox, and pigeons are quiet, legal almost everywhere, and entirely invisible to neighbors. The next animal closes a gap most half-acre homesteads never even consider. Fresh fish, raised right in the backyard. It sounds complicated, it isn't. Tilapia are one of the hardiest, most forgiving fish species around, tolerating a wide pH range and temperatures from 75 to 85 degrees, and growing to 1 to 1.5 pounds in just 6 to 8 months. A single 200-gallon stock tank can produce 50 to 75 pounds of fish a year. Real protein, around 26 grams per serving. Low mercury, clean because every input is controlled directly. Startup is affordable, A Rubbermaid stock tank runs about $120. An aquarium air pump adds $25. An Airstone $8. A basic sponge filter $30. And breeding pairs from a hatchery run $20 to $40 a pair, putting total setup around $200 to $400. The daily routine is simple: floating pellets twice a day, a water temperature check, and scrap supplementation from duckweed, vegetable trimmings, or composting worms. Things the homestead is already producing. The system connection here runs deep too. Rabbit manure grows duckweed, the duckweed feeds the tilapia, and the fish water fertilizes the garden, closing yet another loop. Colder climates will need an indoor setup or a heated greenhouse tank through winter, since tilapia need consistently warm water. The final animal on this list ties everything together, and it's the most controversial pick by far. Most people hear pig on half an acre and assume someone's lost their mind, but this isn't a 600-pound commercial hog. American guinea hogs are a heritage breed that tops out around 150 to 250 pounds. Small, docile, and genuinely built for this kind of setup. These are true pasture pigs, grazing, rooting, foraging, and eating kitchen scraps, garden waste, windfall fruit, even leftover whey from goat milk. Essentially everything a homestead produces that would otherwise go to waste. Because 50 to 70% of their diet can come straight from the land and the kitchen, feed costs run dramatically lower than conventional pigs, with no weekly bags of hog feed required. One breeding pair can produce 2 litters a year, 6 to 10 piglets per litter, for 12 to 20 piglets annually, enough to raise a few for the freezer and sell the rest for $75 to $150 each, income that can cover feed costs for the entire homestead. The meat itself is rich and well marbled. Old-fashioned pork with flavor commercial breeds rarely match, and the lard is high quality, perfect for cooking, baking, and soap making. Turned loose on an overgrown section of the property, they'll root it clean in weeks, naturally prepping soil for planting. Housing stays basic, a simple A-frame shelter and electric net fencing, and their small size and calm temperament make them hardy, disease-resistant, and easy to handle. None of this came together perfectly on the first attempt. Picture starting out with 10 chickens, 2 full-sized goats, and a pair of ducks, all bought in the same month, with no system, no rotation plan, and no real sense of how much feed was actually being burned through. By month 3, that setup was running over $300 a month in feed alone. The garden was struggling because the goats kept escaping into it. The duck pen had turned into a swamp. Exhaustion was setting in fast, close to the point of quitting entirely. Then everything got stripped back. The full-sized goats got sold, the flock got downsized, and things restarted with just rabbits and 6 heritage hens on a simple rotation, comfrey planted along the fence line, the chickens foraging through compost piles. Within 4 months, the feed bill had dropped to under $80 a month. Egg production actually went up because the birds were healthier on diverse forage, and the rabbit manure turned the garden around completely, producing more vegetables than the household could eat. That's when it clicked. Self-sufficiency was never about having the most animals. It's about having the right animals working together in a system where each one supports the next. Quail came next, then bees, then Muscovies. One species at a time, one season at a time, each addition making the whole system stronger instead of more complicated. The feed bill for all 9 species combined ended up lower than what used to get spent on chickens alone. That's the power of a closed-loop system. A few mistakes tend to kill most half-acre homesteads before they ever become self-sustaining. Mistake 1, starting everything at once. Buying 5 species in the first season guarantees being overwhelmed by month 2, since different animals need different housing, different feed schedules, different health management. Mastering one system for 4 to 6 months before adding the next builds real, transferable knowledge. Someone running rabbits successfully for a full season ends up knowing more than someone juggling 5 species and failing at all of them. Mistake 2, ignoring the system connections. Animals standing alone on a property are just mouths to feed. The real magic happens when rabbit manure feeds the garden, garden scraps feed the quail, bee pollination boosts every yield, and duck foraging handles pest control. Without designing connections between species, The result is just a small, expensive zoo. Mistake 3. Choosing animals emotionally. A cute goat on Instagram or a favorite YouTuber's Highland cattle isn't a plan. That's impulse shopping. Every animal needs to earn its place based on what it actually contributes to a specific space, climate, and set of goals. Mistake 4. Underestimating feed costs. Without calculating a real monthly feed bill before bringing an animal home, it's a gamble, not a plan. Tracking every dollar for 3 months reveals whether a given animal is earning its keep or quietly draining resources. Picture this 2 years out. Walking out the back door, everything is working. Rabbits producing meat monthly, quail laying daily, heritage hens scratching through compost, dwarf goats turning brush into fresh milk, Muscovies hatching their own replacements, bees boosting every plant on the property, pigeons quietly producing protein on autopilot, tilapia growing in a tank fed by homegrown duckweed, and a small heritage pig converting every scrap of waste into next winter's pork. The feed bill is a fraction of what it used to be. Grocery trips get shorter. And the freezer stays full of food, raised from the same half acre that once seemed too small to matter. Half an acre is enough. It always was. The difference is in building a system instead of collecting animals, one species at a time.